Severance sucks. And I'm not talking about the show. Well, I kind of am. But I'm talking about the procedure shown in the show. It's much more realistic than you might think initially, and today I'm going to explain why and how damaging that could be. Severance is defined by Oxford Languages as the action of ending a connection or relationship. This can be depicted in many ways, like breaking up with a loved one, ghosting, blocking, cutting someone off, or even more long-term, like homicide or suicide. The Apple TV Plus television series Severance depicts the act in a more unique and, at first look, incorrectly, possibly less harmful way. A brain implant. This brain implant, this act of severance, is a net negative. It is a seemingly permanent solution to a very, very temporary problem. It isn't truly a solution at all, similar to putting a band-aid on a gunshot wound. For the three main reasons we'll cover later in this video, you should not consider a future in severance. And spoiler alert, by the way, obviously, if you didn't already get that. In a quote from USA Today, Severance is reminiscent of other twisty sci-fis, including Amazon's Homecoming and Netflix's Black Mirror, both of which feature ordinary people mixed up in shadowy corporate conspiracies and examine the human cost of a technological advancement. The series takes place in the real world, following Mark Scout as he navigates being a severed worker from Lumen's Industries' macro data refinement department. He is a severed worker because he works on the severed floor, on his first day receiving an implant in his brain to completely separate his work from his home life. It is revealed as the show progresses that the reason why he and many of his coworkers did such was to forget. In Mark S.'s example, his wife passed away. He used to be a college professor, but he simply couldn't return to work after. He felt as though he needed to leave that part of him, arguably with the rest, behind. He decided it would be better to forget his trauma as opposed to facing it, which truly only prolonged the issue. Number 1. Forgetting isn't fixing. Just because someone forgets they have dementia doesn't mean they don't have it. That's actually the whole point of it. People can forget they're sick, but at the end of the day, if they're sick, they need treatment. And if they don't find a real cure or do something about it, they will only get sicker over time. The reason why I compare the act of severance to a band-aid on a gunshot wound is because there's no real long-term benefit. It may seem worthwhile at first, but how will someone know they're making progress if they can't even remember half of their days? Also mentioned in the show is the fact that just because the severed versions of the individuals may not remember specific dilemmas, doesn't mean that they don't still hold the mental strain with them in some ways. As one of severed Mark Scout's workmates told his outie self when referring to Mark's late wife, "You carry that hurt with you. You feel it down there too, you just don't know what it is." Reason number 2, even in cases where trauma isn't at play, the show portrays an unethical workplace, which can't be called out because the minute the workers leave the floor, they aren't that version of themselves. The severed workers can't remember the issue in the slightest because the outside version of themselves, commonly referred to as outies, didn't experience the problem and don't remember it. The innie or work version of the person can complain as much as they want, but if the management is corrupt, those complaints will die in the water. As stated by the New Republic, every one of the mysteries in Severance, however, has a logical explanation. Lumen has simply created a system of myths, legends, and office regulations to mask the grubby process of exploitation and extraction that is the company's business. Whether trauma did or did not occur before the severance is irrelevant. The separate versions of the people, outies and innies, are now both given new, more complex, and harder to understand or even recollect traumas. Similarly to split personality disorder, just because there's more than one version of a person doesn't always mean that more is better, as the popular saying goes. In the series, the process and result of the severing procedures is extremely controversial, treated similarly to an abortion or vaccine usage in our current political climate. People are shown debating their right to choose or receive severance. Conveniently, it is typically those who haven't undergone the surgery or are severed themselves and yet don't realize the lengths of how horrible it truly is. Protesters in the show argue the moral questionability of severing one's life, comparing them to slaves, working until their demise for the big corporation. Their demise being the moment their outie leaves the company, because when such time comes, their innie will essentially pass on. To Severance viewers, severance is naturally taken as immoral. We see that it's the root of so much anguish in our favorite innies, as they spend every waking moment of their limited existence in a sterile, windowless office, refining data and wondering what it's really like to live, as stated by Slate magazine. Along with other human rights issues, animal rights also draw a multitude of parallels. The logic of the larger, from the 1914 book The Humanities of Diet by Henry Salt, encapsulates very similar ideas to that of severance. Is it justified to murder animals because if they were to have never been murdered, they likely wouldn't have been born either? Although there are arguments on either side, Salt describes it as a fallacy, linking to slavery and explaining that they were only to have been born out of human self-interest. Severing is only truly in Lumen's best interest. Part 3, Section 3. Part 3, and the most important part, this isn't far off from reality. This entire topic may seem like a far-off fanfiction piece that isn't really tied to reality, but that's not at all the case. Borderline or split personality disorder, dementia, abortion, vaccine usage, and animal slaughtering are examples that all cross over heavily with this fictional narrative. Just because the show may not have occurred in real life doesn't mean that valuable lessons cannot be taught through it as a vessel. Looking at workplaces all over the world, unfortunately, slavery and mistreatment of their workers runs rampant. Long hours, low pay, and unsuitable work conditions are much more common than any morally grounded person would hope. In 2023 alone, an estimated 7,500 lives were lost every single day around the world due to unsafe working conditions. Aside from the obvious mistreatment of the main cast, this is shown in the Lumen offices throughout the show's second season with the addition of Miss Wong, a character representative of child slavery. Although Miss Wong isn't directly given an age, she is referred to as a child multiple times throughout the series. A child who is most likely working illegally and most certainly working in unfair conditions. How different are big corporations like Nike, Shein, Temu, and Apple from Lumen? Even looking at Neuralink, they are currently in development for brain implants to help those impaired. But serious type of traumas like post-traumatic stress disorder are considered impairments. PTSD is the same impairment that many of Severance's characters are depicted to likely be struggling with. Neuralink's owner, Elon Musk, has already shown his moral gray space. He's already cut funding for pediatric cancer research. Who's to say he doesn't turn fiction into reality next? Severance isn't as far off as it may currently seem. A person can ignore or forget their traumas for as long as they want, but that doesn't solve anything. Humans have been gifted with memory, and to take such away has very few benefits in comparison to the many outpouring negatives. The reality is that large corporations don't always have their employees' best interests at heart. The reality is that many workers are extremely mistreated. The reality is that many attempt to use permanent solutions to patch temporary issues. The reality is that this show covers extremely real topics. It isn't as far out from reality as most would assume or hope. This show transcends the television screen and has reached critical acclaim to no fault. Because of the deeper truth intertwined with the thrilling tale, it has become Apple TV's most watched program ever, receiving 28 awards with 105 nominations. In the hopefully not so soon, but likely not so far off future, this process of severance may occur. Just remember that it is by long shot a net negative. Remember to remember. The reality is that Severance may be an excellent show, but the procedure is worse than not worthwhile. It sucks. Don't get severed. Don't get severed. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, let me know what other topics I should cover, and you should go check out my IRL channel where I've been posting a lot more recently.